The following is spoken without prejudice. I was born and bred in RD. I believed in coming home I had something to offer, only to be terrorized to the point of near self-destruction when I opened my mouth in protest against corruption and the bank bailouts. My business and my personal life were both placed under attack intensively. It appears I may be in a moment of respite, having felt the brunt of the attacks. For that I am grateful. However, the problem has not gone away, and nobody has been called to account. Before I begin, I wish to apologise to any member of An Garda Síochána who feels I am being unjust and unfair in my presentation. This is not aimed at them. There are without doubt hard-working, decent members on the force who I imagine are as frustrated by what is taking place as I am, and members of the public are. That said, there is a serious problem in An Garda Síochána, and it needs to be acknowledged. A cover-up is not acceptable, and inaction will not restore my constitutional rights, nor put an end to the continuous underhanded interference in my life. Unless people are called to account, others will be subjected to the same fate as myself by those effectively operating under the protection of An Garda Síochána. While the Church was ultimately powerless to defend itself from scrutiny, An Garda Síochána and the justice system are not. Justice and policing are the last elephants of Irish society and wield enormous power. They cannot be allowed to operate without being called to account in a free and open society. Unfortunately, to take them on can mean personal ruination, which is why people prefer to look the other way. I believe there are groups of individuals with An Garda Síochána who are carrying out attacks on individuals on behalf of third parties, be they corrupt politicians, powerful business interests, or illegal organisations. It is also conceivable that they act on their own behalf, in a form of payback, where they have not managed to thwart the system, the justice system, in their favour. They are in a position to use the power of the law to attack an individual and thwart the process of justice by concealing evidence and coaching witnesses, with the goal of destroying an individual's reputation, while at the same time availing of criminals in the community whom they know personally and with whom they have a quid pro quo arrangement to carry out attacks on their victims. They are also connected to all organs and institutions of the state, as well as European institutions such as Europol, which enables interference in all areas of an individual's life. This is enabled by a culture of silence in An Garda Síochána, which looks the other way and is too afraid to speak out for fear of the consequences, as these individuals will enforce their will without being held accountable, as accountability is not part of the Garda work culture. There is also, I believe, a culture of misinformation with An Garda Síochána, which enlists naive and eager young recruits to assist in these acts. These individuals are further enabled by a GSOC which will not investigate any allegations, no matter how glaringly obvious the problem is, as it hides behind the mantra of, "We do not investigate unless we have names and definitive incidents for which clear-cut evidence exists." Given practically nobody in An Garda Síochána is willing to allow identification of any of its colleagues, unless they have a career death wish, this is near impossible to provide. It is further enabled by a government that washes its hands of all responsibility, and a criminal justice system which, in my experience, is sycophantic and not adversarial, whereby judges berate defendants' legal representation if they don't show proper deference as though guilty, all pretense at impartiality gone. Meanwhile, legal representation simultaneously cowers to the judges while bullying their defenceless and in-shock clients behind closed doors. The most shameful part of all this is not that these individuals exist. We all know there are corrupt members on the force. It is the fact An Garda Síochána does what it can to conceal their existence by belittling and undermining the individual under attack. Given the manner in which I was placed under attack up and down the country, I believe such individuals exist in every Garda region in the country, are known to one another and work in tandem with criminal elements in their community. Having brought clear-cut evidence of online interference impacting my work to my local Garda station, I was told by the Garda on duty after consultation with his local sergeant, "It is not possible to investigate the digital instance without taking your computer away, and with the backlog, it could take 2 to 5 years before you get your computer back." I found that to be extraordinarily ignorant, given the interference is clearly via my broadband and not the hardware itself. I have detailed over a dozen variety of tactics used on my Twitter account, drawn from a playbook that could easily have been written by any authoritarian regime. From the time I ran for election on a platform of reform and transparency in 2009 for Louth County Council, in the wake of the economic crash, and brought allegations of election fraud, I have been subjected to ongoing relentless harassment of one kind or another, including death threats, and have experienced heightened trauma, corruption, fear and anxiety. Prior to the 2009 elections, I stood with a megaphone in Market Square RD and shouted out that NAMA was unconstitutional. I railed against corruption. Shortly after, items started to disappear from my home, which I then reported to the police. My allegations of election fraud were based on certain anomalies I noticed during the 2009 local county council elections count in Dundalk. I reported my suspicions to An Garda Síochána. After the third count in 2009, the ballot papers were recalled due to papers from one election area appearing in the election boxes of another area 12 miles away. We were told the count had been stopped and would recommence in the morning, and so went home for the night. When I returned in the morning, the count had been completed. It was conducted during the night. The election results made a noticeable return after the recall. I first took my suspicion of election interference at RD Garda station, where a Garda took the USB stick with my documents, went inside and came back a little while later and informed me I had to go to Navan Garda station. I waited in Navan Garda station and was then told I had to go to Dundalk Garda station, where the incident occurred, where I finally had an incident opened. In other words, I was sent by the Garda in RD on a wild goose chase. In earlier reports, I have documented how various acts of harassment and intimidation against myself began in force on Sunday the 27th of December 2018, with a Ford Mondeo car appearing rammed outside my gate the following day. Since that fateful day, over the past 6 years, I have documented numerous incidents. In 2019 alone, I documented approximately 60 incidents, including the face-to-face sit-down with a gang boss, where I was given a thinly veiled death threat. Many of those incidents covered a multitude of occurrences, as I classified them under one heading, such as interference with my iPhone. iPhone interference took place on a nearly daily basis, with my phone being interfered with in all manners of ways, which I documented. My iPhone, by the way, went missing on a flight with Ryanair in early 2019 and took an unusual amount of time to be returned, presumably seeking materials that could be used against me. Other incidents included clear evidence of interference with my motor vehicle, iMac, Chromebook, stolen property, break-ins, property leaks, interference with my websites, Facebook, home broadband, hotel visits, interference in the purchase of my family home, and on, all of which were reported to An Garda Síochána. On my last visit to An Garda Síochána in January 23 to report the details of the 4 leaks I have had on my property, I was browbeaten and spoken to in a fashion that now deters me from having any further face-to-face contact with An Garda Síochána. The Garda in question told me he had no knowledge of any prior incidents, and he had been in the station for 14 years. He also asked what motive anyone would have to perpetrate these acts. I said perhaps it had something to do with my running for election under a banner of reform and transparency. He replied quite agitatedly, "And how did that go for you?" I found his response quite incredulous, given I had corresponded 9 times with the station between the 28th of October 2019 and the 31st of August 2021, for which I received 1 letter of response to my initial letter to the superintendent, where he appointed a sergeant to look into my case. This led to an interview in November 2019, where I was promised an investigation would be carried out. I received the death threat referred to above a few days later, after arranging this interview by phone, which I notified the station and was registered on the Pulse system. I then received a call in May 2021 when the sergeant stated the Gardaí were prepared to investigate a single criminal incident, referring to the documentation I had supplied as allegations. I then wrote suggesting what to investigate, namely Vodafone and the grey Ford Mondeo car parked outside my gate mentioned above, for which I supplied comprehensive documentation and a number plate, believing the car to belong to An Garda Síochána by the agitated response I received when I first reported it as an obstruction to the Gardaí. In response to my letter, I received a call on the 11th of September 2021 from the investigating sergeant who put me on speakerphone. He explained he had received my documents and was not currently based in Ardee. He said the Gardaí would have no reason to put me on the surveillance and that I should change phone provider. He offered no further help, and that was the last contact I had with anyone in An Garda Síochána. At the time of my last communication with the station superintendent in April 2021, I was informed he had also left the station. I also corresponded with GSOC 5 times commencing 21st July 2019 until the 18th of August 2019, as well as corresponded with politicians and the Minister of Justice several times. So to be given this response on my last visit to the Garda station in January 23, that the Garda on duty had been in the station 14 years and had heard nothing of prior incidents, left me dumbfounded. It was as if he was trying to create a new reality, with the matter brushed under the carpet and anyone connected to it moved to another station. One objective of these perpetrators has clearly been a desire to have me vacate my home, as evidenced by a handful of small printed cutouts left lying around my property with the word rental written on them. To date, nothing I have reported since 2018 has been investigated, despite detailed communications with GSOC, the Ministry of Justice, An Garda Síochána, my local political representative, and the Taoiseach's office. The last acknowledgement of receipt I received from the Taoiseach's office was in February 2023, but I've heard nothing since, despite sending a follow-up email. The bigger picture, of course, is that this is not about me or any one individual. It is about the attack on our democracy that silences all of us for fear of the same treatment. Of course, given the unlimited funds available, paid for courtesy of the taxpayer, no doubt, to attack and undermine an individual through the surreptitious or blatant use of law enforcement, it should not come as a surprise that when an individual is being tortured and intimidated over a period of years, attempts are then made to exploit any vulnerabilities that may unfold or be existent within the individual, as the campaign to destroy continues unabated, resulting in a breaking down of the individual to be then stoned in the marketplace of public opinion. Before I describe a number of related incidents that occurred in 2023, I would like to point out the presence of two men I encountered at the pool I attend, whom I believe to be connected in some way to the events that have been occurring due to the conversations they have had in my presence, indicating intimate knowledge of events in my life. On one such encounter, the taller of the two sat next to me in the jacuzzi and spoke about music in the key of A. In the past year, I have taken up lessons and am attempting to write my own music as a way to communicate what I am going through. This was the same man who on another occasion in the jacuzzi spoke of how during the Civil War, when Garda Síochána did not get involved and stayed in their barracks. That was at the same moment I was reading a book online on the history of the Gardaí, and it mentioned exactly that. On a third occasion, I listened as he spoke with the second man mentioned above in the steam room about the problems with cats making snot on windows and how difficult it can be to clean windows on old houses as you don't see the marks with the proper sunlight. This referred to my efforts at that time to clean the marks and snots off old sash windows as I installed double glazing on top of them, and the problems I had with my cat who was suffering from intermittent nasal problems leading to significant snot, which I believe were in part artificial, as I myself ended up with the same sneezing for a short time after holding the cat. The cat's nasal problems would also suddenly appear of an evening on my return from a day's outing. These two individuals were together on at least 2 occasions as I sat in the steam room. With that said, on Monday the 22nd of May 2023, around lunchtime, on a day off from work, I decided to take a trip to the pool. It was quite empty. I arrived to find 3 gentlemen in the jacuzzi, obviously together, one of whom immediately lay his head on his arm and looked directly at me in a fashion that left me taken aback. One might be forgiven for describing these individuals as male models. I continued into the steam room, and when I exited, a third man looked at me and tilted his head back smiling, as though issuing an invitation. I was again somewhat taken aback, and instead of going to the jacuzzi, I decided to leave the pool entirely. On this occasion, I had cut my swim time and my time in the steam room by half, and so left unusually early. I was not comfortable with the situation. As I exited the pool, I encountered the same man entering, partner to the taller man mentioned above. I had encountered on at least 2 prior occasions. He was the quieter of the 2. When I exited at the coffee bar, there were a group of men waiting, with 2 sitting at a small coffee table. They reminded me of a camera crew huddled in the corner of a scene, except they had no cameras. The one facing me, sitting at the coffee table, apparently tall, had his hoodie pulled down over his face, with an exaggerated peak 5 to 6 inches clearly and intentionally blocking any form of recognition. As I went outside, a Garda car drove up at about 5 miles per hour. I stopped as I felt it was heading towards me. When I looked into the car, the young officer smiled and waved me on. I felt by my early exit I had somehow taken a peek behind the scenes of what can only be described as a sting operation of some kind. Whether it was designed to lead me into trouble or simply to build a file for future embarrassment or blackmail, I do not know. One has to wonder at the files that are being kept on politicians and public servants, to be used as and when required to push forward a specific agenda. I myself have had to introduce adult filters on my own phone to prevent any unwanted or illegal materials appearing after 2 experiences which left me quite shocked and disgusted. If you cannot intimidate and scare an individual, you can at least discredit them. I am not surprised politicians are too scared to engage on this topic. The 2 previous weeks, other incidents occurred which I found troubling. On the first occasion, there was the same tall man I referred to above next to me in the jacuzzi. On this occasion, 2 young guys sat opposite and were noticeably excited, and later took their games into the pool. In the locker room as I cleaned up, one passed and raised his swim trunks tight on his bum cheeks right in my face as they both giggled. On the second occasion, as I prepared to go to swim, a middle-aged man sat opposite me in the locker room, staring with a death stare. I entered the pool and he positioned himself next to me as I entered and exited, and stared with a hard, cold stare, as though there were not 1 ounce of warmth in his soul. A very spooky individual with a very dark purpose. These are but some of the many attempts to intimidate and compromise me in my personal life I've experienced. When I ran for election, one young girl in full makeup stood up in the jacuzzi, put her hand on her hip like a model, tilted her head back slightly, and started looking from left to right as if posing. On another, and for quite a number of weeks, a young girl, most likely a minor, kept appearing at the pool each time I went to swim, regardless of the time of day, along with her mentor, who seemed to be telling her what to do as she threw herself in front of me and at one point stared down and smiled as I arrived at the end of my swim lap. When I complained on Twitter about how disgusted I was by what was happening, her appearances abruptly ended. These attempts at entrapment continue. This year alone there have been several instances. In the most recent, on Thursday the 11th of July 2024, a very bubbly and attractive young blonde girl of an age which is hard to determine followed me into the steam room with her mentor, discussing how she had been to the doctor due to depression and was having her thyroid checked. She and her mentor then followed me into the jacuzzi, where she remained as her mentor went to swim. As a nutritionist interested in depression, it would have been very easy for me to begin a conversation. I simply ignored her. Eventually she left and rejoined her mentor at the poolside, where they chatted before they both exited the pool. I left the pool furious at the pathetic attempts at entrapment. It takes a long time for the mind to accept what is unimaginable. It is so easy to be blindsided when it goes against what you hold to be true. In fact, I would have to say blindsiding people is a very common way of pulling the wool over people's eyes. However, what happened on Sunday the 21st of May 2023 simply confirmed what I had suspected for some time. On this occasion, I went to a location I frequented for a brief respite. On my return, I noticed a female guard on duty at the entrance to a shopping centre on a main road, whom I had met before, presumably to control traffic coming in and out for an event that was taking place on the main road. After driving down the road and onto a country lane, I regretted not stopping to say hello and pulled in off the road to consider if I should go back. After 5 minutes, I decided to do so, and as I came back onto the main road, about 250 meters away, on the brow of the hill, I noticed the guard in question starting to walk away about 25 meters from her station, towards me in the direction of nowhere, in the same way someone trying to avoid someone does, only to realize they're embarrassing themselves by the obvious. I pulled into the shopping center and then turned around and headed back out, as I was quite surprised. On my way back at the spot where I had pulled in to deliberate, a guarded car was parked with its headlights blaring at me as I approached. The message was obvious. However, in that active power play, I had an important suspicion confirmed. My movements were being tracked by An Garda Síochána, most likely via my mobile phone, which in turn suggests An Garda Síochána are far more aware of my situation than they like to pretend. This is why I also believe members of the Garda Síochána are involved in what is taking place, and why I brought my complaints to GSOC. Who else has the ability to monitor all internet and mobile phone usage, with the ability to manipulate data which is being communicated across the net, should they choose to do so, both here in Ireland and in the European Union? Who else is empowered to eavesdrop on mobile phone communications, interfere with email and social media such as Facebook, Messenger, mount round-the-clock surveillance both at home and abroad, bypass house alarms, interfere in banking transactions via disruption to web traffic, disrupt postal services and financial affairs, prevent investigations, and essentially wreak havoc in any area of our lives should they choose to do so? Why else would Vodafone persistently refuse to respond to letters detailing what has taken place and my demands that my civil rights be protected? To illustrate, I will give one simple example. At the time I was experiencing significant interference on my iPhone and Chromebook, I also experienced the same issues on trips to Spain. This is all documented and sent to An Garda Síochána. More recently, over a period of 2 years, I was unable to use my iPad in Ireland as part of an ongoing campaign of interference. After reinstalling the operating system several times, it would work temporarily, but quickly my apps would be blocked. It was also blocked when using it on other broadband networks in my hometown. As an experiment, I took my iPad on a 5-day trip to Norway in April 2022, which is outside the EU. I had none of those problems. This led me to believe once a device is identified by its digital signature anywhere on the net, both in Ireland and in the EU, it can be tapped into and manipulated. Norway is not a member of Europol, a European-wide police organisation. In the same way, I bought a laptop to be able to communicate privately for legitimate reasons. In the beginning, I was able to do so. Now, regardless of where I log on, all access to the relevant website is blocked. I have multiple USB ports in my home, and I've noticed how it is possible to have a machine on a specific port interfered with, while no interference occurs on another. Months earlier, the connector cable for the laptop permitting a USB and power cable to be used together was also damaged. These incidents remind me of the firewall that exists around China, whereby Chinese citizens' access to the internet is monitored and controlled. In frustration, I have tried to use the Tor browser on all my personal computers. It will not connect. It is blocked. I appear to be living in a cyber-controlled virtual world. I believe Gardaí to be involved in what is taking place. I believe they are using resources around the country in this project of fear and intimidation, which can only mean one of two things. Either there is a network of corrupt Gardaí around the country working hand in hand with criminal gangs, or else this is a national operation being conducted with the full knowledge of the Garda chain of command and or the silent or not so silent support of the government. Of course, interference is not just reserved to home. Every holiday or event I attend since the ongoing harassment commenced is marked by one incident or another. I always head out wondering what lies ahead. I will detail what occurred on one such trip to Spain in June 23. Naturally, a program of interference cannot allow you to de-stress, and so interference is the norm. On my arrival in Spain, I hired a car and placed the phone into the charging cable. I got a notification the phone was charging, but I could feel it quite warm. On many occasions in the past, my phone has discharged due to this phenomenon. It appears to be an app running in the background, needlessly using up the battery. This time my phone died towards the end of the trip, meaning I had no directions to follow. On my return, a similar experience happened, even though in the intervening week I had used the car successfully to add charge to my phone. On the day of my return, the phone went blank just as I was about to check in for my flight. Luckily, in this case, the boarding card was to be collected, and I did so with my passport. I managed to get a 15-minute charge in the airport to assist me with my second flight. That was still not enough, even though my battery was in excellent health, so I had to keep the phone turned off only when needed for the boarding pass. Batteries, of course, are an easy win when it comes to harassment, particularly on a mobile, as it is vital to travel. For example, the batteries on my business door swipe lock were discharged for 12 weeks in a row the morning the therapist was due in, until I finally gave up. Then at Christmas, after my 4-year-old healthy cat died under the suspicious circumstances of an apparent heart attack, according to the autopsy report, which would reflect the state of distress I found her in on a number of occasions after being away for a day, I went to the rescue and took home the last 2 rescue cats, one a kitten and the other a very terrified 2-year-old, and had them chipped to be able to use the cat door. I then had to change the batteries repeatedly as they kept discharging whenever I left the house, lasting no more than a day or 2, making the cat door unusable in my absence. I had no choice but to give up. On a side note, I was devastated by my cat's passing. It occurred in addition to multiple incidents I had shouldered at the same time, all reported to Gardaí shortly before Christmas 22. One couldn't cut deeper. It took me 3 months to get back on my feet as I felt totally gutted. For the past number of years, a barrage of incidents have occurred in the lead up to Christmas in an attempt to bring me to my knees. My holiday, however, went to plan until the last day for surf. The day started quite simply, with my name being left off the bus list, after I'd put my name the day before onto a blank sheet. Then, that afternoon, I received a call from the agency regarding a job opportunity, and as I inquired the details, I experienced very distinct interference of a mangled and sharp sound, exactly the same as I've experienced on previous calls related to business in Ireland. I could not hear anything. The interference was metallic, persistent, and high-pitched. Later that day, I tried to book Arabic bats in Granada for the following and last day in Spain. As I was about to press enter on the payment screen, I could see it was for the day before. When I went back screen, I could see how I had entered the correct date. This is a trick I have dealt with on many occasions, with flights and accommodation, where on the payment screen the booking date has been altered. This was a little before 5 p.m. I began the process all over again, but this time it refused to enter the payment screen and said it had communication problems. After several tries, I phoned and made the reservation over the phone. I was told an SMS and an email would arrive to carry out the payment. None did. I called back at 20:35 and was told they were sent out at 18:30. The operator resent the SMS and still nothing arrived. I called back again and we agreed I could carry out the payment at the bats, which I did. As we agreed this, the call became mangled towards the end, in the same way as before, as if adding a signature to the process. After my return from my holiday, I found my cats in total disarray. The older cat had run away, and after bringing her back, she did all in her power to run away again. She is a very timid cat, and being on the property scared her. The younger black cat I found crying, hiding in the loft. This cat went from being open to strangers to running and hiding the minute someone entered the house. This trip is but one example of overseas interference. Similar tactics are employed when I attend events, with the clear intention of leaving a mark on the day and spoiling any enjoyment I may have. On April 1st, 2023, I attended a day conference on nutrition, where my leather jacket was ripped and my sports bottle taken from my car as a reminder in case I had any doubts. Also after the event, when I pulled into a motorway service area for food and rest, when I returned to my car, my wing mirror was hanging out of the cradle for no apparent reason. This is standard for any event or holiday I take. The idea is that all aspects of my life should be made intolerable by interfering in different ways while traveling or when going out for an occasion. This time I ordered a new replacement bottle on Amazon. Instead of the blue bottle I ordered, I received a pink one. I replaced the order and the same happened again. Many other orders have been interfered with on Amazon in the same way, as postal deliveries related to important financial transactions have been repeatedly lost. For instance, a letter arrived on the 7th of September, which was sent on the 18th of June, informing me to go online within 7 days to receive a not insignificant payment due to me, else a check would be issued. The check never arrived. The arrival of the letter coincided with my postponing my builder the day before while I organised funds for his visit, as if making me aware of how my life has been interfered with. Throughout 2023, I received bogus text messages the day prior to a postal delivery from the UK demanding fake customs payments. In other words, in one way or another, organised crime and post office deliveries are now intertwined. The attacks have been on every area of my life with the aim to cripple me in whatever way possible. Just before I left for my holiday to Spain and on my arrival, other events occurred designed to add significant stress to my life. It is a very common tactic to have SMS and emails blocked, particularly for business. Example, emails validating website security certificates and resetting website passwords never arrive. Anything related to online activity is easily targeted, as happened when I set up an online booking system for my clinic where calls were blocked. And of course, there is the website hacking where website files were placed on my website, causing it to malfunction, or links are broken to YouTube, blocking materials from being available. On a visit to my dentist in 2023, I complained I was not receiving reminders for my appointments. They showed me on the screen that they had sent them, but there was a message saying non-delivery, even though they had been sent successfully before the pandemic, and the phone number was the same. More recently, I had my Facebook ad account disabled for political ads, as my disclaimer was unlinked, not by me. When I tried to verify the disclaimer once more via my Gmail account to restore my ability to send out posts, no verification code arrived. I fixed the issue by using a private secure email service instead. I have also received several bogus requests to revalidate my political page. Online interference with payments is commonplace and have been quite frequent whenever it's for a business need. In 2023, I attempted to place an advert on one of the property websites over a period of 3 weeks. Each time I attempted to pay, I was blocked. I tried 2 different bank cards and a credit card. I contacted support and they could not help. I was forced to go with an existing advert on a different platform, whose price had just been tripled. The advert was then reduced to its old price shortly after. On the 19th of July 2023, I experienced another incident, which to my mind had all the hallmarks of being staged. At approximately 8:20 p.m. as I drove on the Old Dundalk Road on my way home, I noticed a relatively new car come around the corner towards me and then swerve slightly into the centre and back, which I immediately thought unusual and intentional, as it appeared counterintuitive. As I looked towards the ongoing car and turned my car slightly away, not really feeling threatened, I heard a sudden explosion on my window on the driver's side. Fortunately, I was not driving fast. I immediately looked and on inspection could see no sign of any foreign debris. No evidence whatsoever was left of any object impacting the screen. At the time, I was not particularly concerned as no serious damage was done, and I was in no particular danger. However, once the significance of this sank in, about 30 minutes later when shopping, I felt a momentary shock, as it occurred after completing a draft of this post. It also coincided with notes I made on my mobile a week earlier to sell the car, meaning now it would not be so easy to do so. So this type of event taking place would not be untypical. Further, on the 10th of August 2023, I went on a 2-night trip to Kilkenny Arts Festival, where I encountered a most obnoxious individual in the hostel room where I stayed, who spent his entire time throughout the night eating and obviously forcing out wind in the bunk under mine, having earlier sought to harangue me with conversation on my arrival without as much as an introduction. He also laid out every personal item on the floor, making it impossible to find space for my own items. The floor was totally covered. By 7:30 a.m. he was gone. On my return home, I then found a clean-cut tear on the seat I sit on to write this report. In addition, my black cat disappeared on day 1 of my trip, as its minder informed me, and has not returned home since, despite knowing there is food left out for it and its playmate is at home. This is a cat reared on the property who played every day with a kitten I recently brought home from the rescue, and whom I mentioned above as crying on my return from my last trip away. It's not the kind of cat to go up to strangers, as it has become weary of strangers over the year. Initially it was very friendly, but after my trip to Spain it became very weary and afraid. Now it suddenly vanishes without a trace. I also suspected my cats have been doped at times, leading to erratic behaviour in their eating patterns and general deportment. So in the space of 9 months, I have had 1 cat die of a heart attack, the second run away out of utter terror, and the third disappear on the very day I went on holidays. It seems as I prepared this document in August 2023, more and more incidents occurred. For example, a week later on the 19th of August 2023, when I arrived at my local pool, I noticed my sports bag filled with shower wash gel. This has happened on other occasions, but not to this extent. I searched for the bottle and it was completely empty and cleaned and washed out on the inside. This occurred just 2 days after my previous trip to the pool. In other words, in the space of 9 days, there were at least 2 incidents of trespass onto my property, where my chair had been damaged and my wash bag gel emptied out. And that does not include all the other violations of privacy that have occurred. In addition, I put on a pair of socks and developed a rash in one foot. When I switched the socks, the rash went to the other foot. Peppering items of clothes and bedding and computer equipment is another way to harass and intimidate. The evidence is therefore 100% clear. Individuals have entered my property when I'm away, and there's nothing I can do about it. If I go to the local Garda station, there is a good chance I will end up being berated, as I have been, or worse still. I believe the present culture of silence within Garda Síochána protects those who are involved, to the extent that they thrive in the organisation. Our communities have been silenced where speaking out can have serious consequences. That is why, to preserve our democracy into a future where AI will become a greater part of our lives, we need real reform and real transparency, and a return to democratic control. If our current levels of technology are being as abused as they are, despite government regulations, imagine what will happen when we have highly developed AI systems. They won't require someone to sit at a desk monitoring your every digital interaction. AI programmed bots will do the same far more efficiently and with far fewer traces. Right now, from where I'm sitting, democracy in Ireland is out of date, not fit for the times, and waiting for a long overdue overhaul. This is not a problem for tomorrow, it is a problem for today, as tomorrow will be too late. As an example of online interference, I recently posted a petition on Facebook, July 2024, calling for the government to clamp down on surveillance abuse. After 50 shares, sharing suddenly stopped and the number of interactions dropped to an exceptionally low number, clearly indicating to me the post was being interfered with. Earlier interactions also indicated the same, but now it has become even more apparent, whereby with a total of 234 likes and 50 shares, there are still only 28 signatures. I feel it's pointless to promote it further. I have had many other instances of interference on Facebook. I firmly believe we are living in an information-controlled society where the news is censored in state media and social media is monitored and manipulated. According to a report in the Sunday Times, April 16, 2023, Ireland ranks 6th in the world per head of population ahead of Israel, Russia and Taiwan for government requests for data from Apple, Google, Meta and Microsoft about online accounts. In all, almost 20,000 accounts. The report states the Security Intelligence Services at Garda HQ is likely to be responsible for the bulk of the requests. In my previous post, I outlined the extensive powers the Gardaí have to mount surveillance and intercept phone and online communications. To put the above into context, we need to examine the Constitution and the law to illustrate just how bad the situation is. A just society is built on its Constitution, and when that is ignored, society descends into anarchy. The Constitution may be a showpiece for foreign affairs, but on the street for the less privileged and less powerful, when it comes to civil rights, it is not worth the paper it is written on, as the individual has no way to enforce it. Those who abuse it are fully aware of that fact and have the resources to remain untouchable, which is why we need to reform our institutions to be transparent and idiot-proof, and why officers of the state should be fully supervised and accountable. What we have in Garda Síochána is a toxic work culture that maintains the balance of power in this country. Nothing's going to change until the ignorance and naivety that maintains this work culture is challenged, and changes are brought in to end its grip on the force. Until that time, we do not have a force that serves all the people. We have a force that serves the government and special interests. When an individual Garda targets an individual, no one will stand up for fear of the backlash within the force. Regardless of the constitutional rights of the individual to a fair trial, evidence can be suppressed, while solicitors are either too afraid to speak out or assist Gardaí against the interests of their own clients, in the hope of a quid pro quo arrangement for clients of higher net worth. No notes whatsoever are required to verify the accuracy of reports in court, while delaying the gathering of evidence for the accused makes it impossible to prove innocence. Bradish versus the DPP, 2001, was an Irish Supreme Court decision that established principles in relation to gathering of evidence. The Supreme Court ruled that the Gardaí are under a duty to seek out and preserve all evidence bearing on the guilt and innocence of an accused. The law therefore requires the Gardaí to investigate fully any complaint and does not sanction suppression of evidence through delaying tactics to ensure it is no longer available or failing to keep records of any significant event in station records. Can we honestly say that this is what is taking place? Individual Gardaí can be influenced to target individuals in all manners of ways, overt and covert. The Gardaí may not necessarily do anything overtly illegal as such, which is why the system is imperfectly in place and will not change. Let's look at some of the rights we have as citizens under the Constitution. The Constitution guarantees that you have a right to liberty and freedom, except in accordance with the law. Article 40.4. Is that right protected when officers suppress evidence and keep no account of pertinent offence in station logs? You also have a right to freely express your convictions and opinions, Article 40.6.1.I. However, that right can be limited in the interest of public order and morality. Is that right protected when you're subjected to year-on, year-out harassment for speaking out against election rigging and corruption in politics and receive no help whatsoever from local law enforcement? The Constitution does not specifically state a right to privacy, but the courts recognise that the personal rights in the Constitution imply the right to privacy. It has sometimes been described as the right to be left alone in private settings. For example, your private written communications and telephone conversations cannot be deliberately, consciously, and justifiably interfered with. Given that my digital life is clearly monitored and interfered with, and nothing to my knowledge has been done to stop this intrusion, it is safe to assume my constitutional right to privacy is not considered inviolable. The Constitution declares that the dwelling of a citizen is inviolable and shall not be entered forcibly except in accordance with the law, Article 40.5. This means that no one, including the Gardaí, may enter the place where you live without a warrant or other legal authority to enter. The fact that individuals are entering my home and the Gardaí have no interest in the matter shows how the state has no interest in protecting my constitutional right to an inviolable dwelling. The time has come to modernise our democracy and safeguard the rights of individuals and future generations. I, for one, am a virtual prisoner in the country of my birth, whose constitutional rights have been withdrawn for little or no concern by local Gardaí. It's unlikely this fact will be recognised any time soon without a monumental shift in perception, as the illusion of what it means to be Irish is a bubble we are all depending on. All of us, whether we acknowledge it or not, are living in a state of fear where the lines are clearly drawn, and if we cross them, the world as we know it can come crashing down. The Gardaí work culture has to change. It's crippling the Gardaí and it's crippling the country. However, it will not change of its own volition. No institution reforms itself. From my perspective, there is a culture of intimidation in Irish society, whereby individuals are being targeted by powerful interests, and the victims of those attacks are powerless to fight back, as our government washes its hands of responsibility, and law enforcement services do not want to become involved, are not accountable, are not properly supervised or scrutinised in the use of their powers or responsibilities, and do not speak out against abuses among its own ranks. If we don't pay heed to what is happening, one day the collective fantasy we live under of what it means to be Irish will be replaced by a new reality of what it means to live in a cyber-controlled security state at the disposal of organised crime. We are living in a constitutional crisis, one which we are unable to acknowledge as we are a society cajoled into silence, afraid of becoming the target of the corruption that undermines the civil liberties of all who live in this country. Freedom is not free. Thank you for listening.